The colony had been dead for years, but Owen Ver moved through it like a man who still heard echoes of the living. His boots crunched over frost-hardened glass, every sound a sharp report in the hollow silence of Terali 7. The air was thin and cold enough to fog with every breath, and the steel skeletons of broken buildings leaned against the gray sky at unnatural angles, like bones pressed out of the earth. He carried his rifle slung across his chest, finger brushing the guard, eyes cutting over fractured lines of concrete and rusted beams. Silence kept him alive. Silence was safer than hope. He slipped into the husk of an old factory, its roof, long since caved, girders stabbing upward, as though the place had been frozen mid-collapse. The floor was scattered with bent copper piping, shattered bolts, and insulation hardened by years of exposure. He knew there was little left to scavenge here, but routine ruled his days. Salvage what others missed, trade it for rations, and return to his storage hall before night iced the streets. It was repetition that kept him moving, discipline replacing purpose. Then the air shifted. He felt it before he saw it some flicker in the corner of vision, a disturbance against the rhythm of stillness. Instantly he pivoted, rifle raised, stock tight to his shoulder. His breath steadied, body sliding into the old training like an instinct carved into bone. From behind a broken support beam, a figure stumbled forward. Not a raider, not another scavenger. A woman. Her skin was pale blue beneath streaks of grime, her long white hair tangled and knotted as it spilled across her shoulders. A ceremonial. Silk, once meant for processions, clung in tatters to her thin frame, ripped open at her side to expose a shallow wound. Dirt crusted her hands. Her cloth-wrapped feet were split at the heels, and her silver eyes locked on the rifle leveled at her chest. Her arms rose, trembling but steady enough to show she had chosen the gesture rather than collapsed into it. When she spoke, her voice was low and hoarse, scraped thin by hunger, but it carried. "Don't shoot me, human. Let me live, and I'll give you a family." The words cut through the silence like a blade. Owen froze, finger resting on the guard. He had heard every kind of plea before. Bargaining merchants, cornered thieves, raiders on their knees. This was not that. There was something heavier in it, not just survival, but a last offering, as though she had stripped herself down to the final thing she could give. His mind ran through the calculations. She could be bait, a trap placed by looters hiding in the rafters. But her condition told another story. The shallow scrape on her ribs, the dirt ground into her nails, the way her knees bent as if they might give out at any moment. No staged ambush lasted through starvation. Her pride held her upright when strength had already fled. He studied her face in the broken light that fell through the ceiling. Pride, even in desperation. No smile. No softness, no manipulation. Just defiance pressed against exhaustion. His jaw tightened. Slowly, he flicked the safety on his rifle. The click was sharp in the factory's dead air. He lowered the barrel, though he kept it slung and ready. Relief flickered across her expression, but she didn't collapse into it. She kept her chin high, arms still raised, waiting as if she didn't quite trust the mercy. "You hurt?" he asked, voice flat. "Not bad," she managed. Her throat worked as she swallowed. "Just hungry." He pulled a ration bar from his coat and set it on a nearby crate. Beside it, he placed his canteen. He didn't move closer. "Pick it up," he said. Her eyes flicked from him to the food, her hands trembling harder now. She hesitated. "If I touch it, you won't change your mind later?" His face remained stone. "I don't take back what I give." She lowered her arms slowly, cautious step by step. She snatched the ration and unwrapped it, biting down with a jaw that worked sluggishly, as if her body no longer remembered how to process food. She drank next, short, careful swallows, her eyes closing when water touched her throat. For a moment, her breath hitched, nearly a sob, but she forced it down. Owen watched every detail, the steadiness of her hands when she forced them to stop trembling, the faint sound of her swallowing, the relief that never quite softened into weakness. He recognized it, not a trick, a survivor at the edge. When she lowered the canteen, her silver eyes fixed on him again, sharper now. "You were about to fire," she said. "I don't point unless I'm ready to shoot," he replied. "Now I know you're not a threat." She weighed his words, expression unreadable. Silence pressed between them, not empty but charged. Fragile. Her voice came again, quieter but without wavering. "I wasn't lying. When I said I'd give you a family, I meant it." His jaw tightened. Inside, something shifted, uncomfortable and unwanted, but undeniable. He had locked that word away years ago, buried it with his dead. Family belonged to another life. And yet here it was, thrown back into the air of a ruined factory by a starving woman with silver eyes. He exhaled slowly, voice measured. "Food. First, then we'll see." She nodded, slow and deliberate, as though that small concession was more than she expected. For Owenver, the moment marked a crack in the wall he had built from silence and survival. The factory was no longer just salvage ground. It had become the place where isolation met something unpredictable. And he did not walk away. The service corridor smelled of wet plaster and rust. Owen checked every step before committing his weight, heel to toe, scanning for collapse. The pale light from fractured windows pooled in uneven patches, leaving long stretches of shadow where anything might wait. Era followed half a pace behind, her silver eyes flicking over his movements, mirroring the care in her own way. She looked too thin for the walk, her breath catching on the cold air, but she didn't stumble. Pride held her upright more firmly. Then strength. 40 meters in, he stopped at a maintenance door, half hanging from its hinges. He pressed the back of his knuckles against the frame, listening for vibrations, then leaned his shoulder until it gave with a muted groan. Inside, a service room opened like a small refuge, a dead console beneath a spider-webbed window, a leaning shelf, a patch of floor cleared enough to build heat. Owen stepped through first, rifle sweeping the corners, before motioning her inside. Eased the shelf down, folding his coat neatly across it. "Sit, I'll build fire." She stayed standing for a moment, eyes measuring him as if calculating cost. Only after a beat did she sit, leaving his coat beside her instead of pulling it around her shoulders. He respected the choice and kept his distance, kneeling on the opposite side of the room. From his pack, he drew tinder scrap stripped wire, insulation, dry cloth torn from rags, and struck a spark. A small flame caught and licked upward, its glow shifting across Era's hollow cheeks. He fed it carefully, bricks arranged in a ring to contain it, the movements precise, as if fire itself were another soldier to command. Her gaze never left him. He knew the look. It wasn't awe, it was assessment. She was cataloging him as thoroughly as he cataloged terrain. "Background," he said at last, not looking up. He did not say story. "Why this building?" Era shifted slightly. "Heat piping under the west wall still breathes when the sun hits. I thought there might be a salvaged exchanger. Trade it for rations. Who pointed you here?" "No?" "One." Her voice was steady, stripped of flourish. "Shadow and meltwater on the ground. Followed it 2 weeks. Slept behind a maintenance reel 3 nights. Rats didn't bite. That felt like luck." He nodded once. Practical, not romanticized. "Why did you say family?" She held his eyes across the fire. "It was not a bargain. I used a word with weight. I needed to see if your face changed when you heard it. Men who want to hurt me smile at that word. Men who don't Don't. You didn't. He filed it. A test, direct and clinical. He respected the method. From his pack, he pulled a tin, gauze, and saline. He'd seen the wound at her ribs open. Again when she bent. You'll treat it. I'll explain. Her hands were steadier than her breath as he showed the motion wipe outward, not inward. Press for 5 long counts. She followed each instruction without argument, pausing only once to glance up at his face, checking silently if she was doing it right. He gave no praise, only passed her the longer strip of cloth when she reached for a shorter one. That was answer enough. When she tied it clean, she finally tugged his coat across her shoulders in one smooth motion, as though the act was no surrender, but a deliberate choice. What will you trade the fan motor for? She asked. 2 weeks' rice, maybe a filter. Right buyer's a woman with a scar on her lip. Pays in sealed packs. Counts out loud. She doesn't cheat. Era's mouth moved as if to smile, but it didn't form fully. You watch everyone. I watch who survives long enough to be predictable. The fire popped softly, throwing shadows against cracked walls. He set a pot. Above the flames, poured in water, pinched in salt. She sat straighter, silver eyes following every movement. For the first time since he found her, she didn't look like prey. She looked like someone reclaiming the shape of herself. Do you touch without asking? She said suddenly. No. Do you sell people? No. Do you change rules? When it suits you, I adjust tactics. Principles hold. I don't take back what I give. She sat with that, then gave her own. Don't walk behind me when we move. Don't take food from my hands once I've touched it. Don't open my pack without saying what you need. If we share heat, your hands ask first. He inclined his head. Agreed. My rule, don't wander out of sight in crossings. If I say down, you drop. 3 taps means freeze. 3 taps, she echoed, committing it. He slid his spare gloves across the bricks. They were too big, but she pulled them on, flexing her fingers, rolling the cuffs. The small domestic act settled something raw in the space between them. The broth began to simmer, thin but hot. He split it between 2 lids and slid one to her. She lifted it carefully, blew across the surface, and drank slow. For the first time, color returned faintly to her cheeks. He watched, silent, and marked the shift inside himself. The service room was no longer just cover. It was the first room he had shared in years. The first fire lit for 2. When her eyes lifted to meet his again, the silence between them wasn't empty. It was the beginning of rules, of a language built from survival and consent. Something fragile, dangerous, but undeniable. The morning broke gray over Terali 7. The dead city hushed beneath its blanket of frost. Owen checked the heater, the still, the door chains, moving through each task with soldier's precision before he slung his rifle across his chest. Era was already standing, his shirt draped loose to her thighs, her white hair tucked roughly behind her ears. She had eaten what little broth was left and folded the blanket neatly, as though trying to claim order in the ruins. When he looked at her, she lifted her chin. You're not leaving me here, she said. His jaw tightened. The market's crowded. You don't blend. I've lived in those crowds. I know what happens when you're seen as alone. If I stay behind, I'll believe I've been discarded again. I won't recover from that. The bluntness cut clean through the argument. Owen didn't answer immediately, only weighed her face for deception. There was none. He gave a short nod. Beside me. Same pace. No breaks unless I signal. Her silver eyes softened almost imperceptibly. She tied cord around her ankles where the cloth wraps threatened to unravel, then stood ready. They moved through the skeletal streets together. Concrete split open at odd angles. Walls sagged inward where rebar had rotted. The metallic tongue of rust rode the wind. Owen's boots crunched. Steady on grit, his stride shortened just enough that Aira stayed level at his side. She walked with controlled caution, scanning high ledges and darkened doorframes, as if her survival depended on it, which he knew it had. The market quarter revealed itself in smoke plumes and faint voices. Fires burned in cut-off barrels. Scavengers crouched over heaps of stripped wire, gears, warped metal sheets. The stench of oil and rot clung to the air. Life clung here in ragged edges, trading what the city's corpse still offered. Owen angled them toward the one stall he trusted. The woman with a scar on her lip stood behind her spread of wire coils, counting each length out loud in a voice. Sharp and deliberate. Aira's gaze flicked to her instantly, a faint recognition in the lift of her chin. Owen traded a coil of copper for 2 packs of rice and half a pound of dried root. The woman's eyes brushed over Aira once, curious but unspeaking, then returned to the wire's dot. When they stepped away from the stall, Aira's hand brushed his. It was deliberate, not seeking touch, but giving a warning. "Someone's watching us," she murmured, without moving her lips. "Where?" "Roofline. East gutter." Her eyes never shifted. "They looked away when you turned." Owen didn't break stride, but his focus sharpened. He hadn't seen it. That alone made his respect for her sharpen too. "Keep walking," he said. "Don't show you noticed." The crowd pressed closer as they circled away from the main alleys, smoke stinging the air. Owen adjusted his stride, letting their shoulders brush deliberately. To anyone watching, the message was clear this. Woman wasn't unclaimed, not a stray to be taken. She belonged to someone dangerous enough to stand unflinching in a market full of scavengers. He hated the thought of ownership, but he understood survival's language. And she understood too, her chin lifted, eyes steady, expression hard as stone. They cut through a narrow passage where old signage rattled in the wind, then doubled back toward the safer lanes. Aira's breathing quickened, but her steps stayed measured. Only when they reached the stair tower that led toward Owen's hall did he let the tension slip enough to glance upward. The roof lines looked still. Whoever had watched them had not. Followed. Inside the storage hall, steel door chained, heater humming low, Owen set the rice down and checked the bars. Aira leaned against the wall, arms folded across the oversized shirt. Her voice came low, carrying the weight of what they'd both seen. "If they follow, they'll see I'm with you," she said. "That changes things." "Changes what?" "They'll think I belong to you." Her eyes locked on his, unflinching. "And if they believe that, they might hesitate. Not because of me, because of the kind of man you look like." The words hung between them. Owen's hand rested on the rifle sling, but his eyes stayed fixed on hers. "And what kind of man is that?" he asked. Her lips curved, not into a smile, but something sharper, a ghost of amusement mixed with truth. "The kind people don't risk crossing. The kind that doesn't let go once he's made a decision." The silence stretched, charged, dangerous. For the first time since the factory, Owen felt the walls of his solitude bend further, the rules of survival making space for something else. And he knew whoever had watched them today, they would. Return. The West Block had been a tram station once, back when Trolley 7 carried commuters instead of scavengers. Now it was a hollowed carcass, its roof sagging under rust and frost. A platform below, fractured where half the ceiling had already given way. Owen paused at the entrance, studying the lines of strain across the beams, the way concrete bulged where water had seeped and frozen. His eyes mapped the hazards like a field chart. Aira stood beside him, arms folded into his coat sleeves. Her gaze followed his up to the warped ceiling. "It won't hold long," she said. "Long enough?" Owen answered. His voice was calm, but he kept the rifle slung and ready, weight shifting across his boots with care. They stepped inside, their footfalls echoing in the cavernous space. The air smelled of iron dust and damp stone. Owen's stride was steady, each placement tested before his full weight followed. Aira mirrored him, silver eyes flicking between floor and ceiling. Her breathing stayed shallow, controlled. The first groan came as they reached the midpoint of the platform, a long, low creak like an animal waking. Dust sifted down in faint streams. Aira froze. Owen raised his hand, signaling silence, then motioned forward. The quickest way out was across. Circling would mean exposure in the open streets, and he trusted his judgment of collapsing structures. They moved again, measured, careful. Then the sharp crack snapped through the air like a rifle shot. Aira's head jerked up. One of the main beams had shifted, concrete fracturing in a jagged line. She whispered, breath catching, "It's going to—" The ceiling gave. Concrete. Slabs tore free, dropping in a roar of dust and debris. Owen lunged, shoving her forward. His arm clamped her waist, dragging her across the platform as the slab crashed where she'd stood. Stone split, shards scattering like shrapnel. They tumbled against a wall, dust engulfing them in choking clouds. Aira coughed, eyes wide, body trembling against his chest. His arm held her tight, braced as debris clattered down around them. "You're not hurt," he said, voice even, steadying her. She shook her head, breath hitching. Her knees gave a little, but he hauled her upright with one clean pull. His grip lingered at her waist, anchoring her until she steadied. Only then did he release. Her silver eyes burned sharp through the dust. "You knew it could fall." "I did," Owen admitted. "I thought it would hold long enough." His jaw tightened, dust streaking the scar along his cheek. "Miscalculation. It won't happen twice." She stared at him, breath ragged. "You put yourself between me and the collapse." "I was closer." His answer was flat, practical. "But—" She saw the flicker in his eyes, the weight he didn't voice. He hadn't moved just because he was closer. He had moved because something in him refused to let her vanish into rubble the way his family had. When the dust settled, they pushed forward, navigating broken concrete and twisted beams until they reached the far exit. Aira leaned against the wall, pressing her palms to her thighs, breathing hard. At last she said, quieter, "Back at the market, you didn't flinch when people looked at me. You let them think I belonged to you. Was that your decision or mine?" Owen met her gaze without hesitation. "Both. I won't speak for you, but I'll act to keep you standing. If that means they think you belong, I won't correct it. If you tell me to, I will." Her throat tightened, eyes searching his face for deception. She found none. For the first time, she stepped closer of her own accord, brushing her fingers against his sleeve. Her voice carried steady, despite the tremor in her hand. "Then don't correct it." The silence between them deepened, heavy as the ruins overhead. Owen held her gaze, dust still clinging to his hair and coat. She had chosen. And in that narrow lane of ruin, with collapse still ringing in their ears, something fragile and dangerous took root between them. Outside, the city remained broken and cold. Inside the bond forged beneath falling stone, something new had begun to hold. The storage hall was warmer than the streets, but the air inside carried a different weight that evening. Owen sat at the crate table, methodically sorting bearings and scraps pulled from the west block collapse. His hands moved with familiar precision, size, shape, usefulness, yet his eyes kept drifting to the figure across the room. Aira crouched by the water still, checking the drip rate with the same deliberate care he had taught her only once. She adjusted the intake with steady fingers, silver eyes narrowing in concentration. The flame of the lamp caught in her tangled hair, throwing faint highlights across her pale skin. She straightened slowly, turning toward him. The oversized shirt he had given her hung loose, brushing her thighs, the sleeves rolled clumsily above. Her wrists. For a moment, her expression was unreadable, carved in stone. Then she spoke, voice cutting across the silence. "You keep watching me." Owen's hands stilled on the crate. He didn't deny it. "I checked everything in the room." "That includes you." Her head tilted, eyes sharp. "No, this is different. At the market, at the station. Even here. Your eyes weigh me, like you're trying to decide if I'll stay or if I'll break." His jaw tightened. He placed the last bearing in its pile before answering, voice low and steady. "I weigh everything. Not because I doubt it, but because I don't repeat mistakes. I lost people I thought would stand. I don't plan on losing more." The word lost seemed to pull something taut inside her. She crossed the room, folding her arms across the loose fabric of his shirt, and stopped just a step away. "And what do you see when you weigh me?" He met her gaze without hesitation. "I see someone starving, scraped raw, and still refusing to bow her head. I see a risk I already accepted when I lowered my rifle. And I see someone who hasn't decided yet if she trusts herself more than she trusts me." Her chest rose and fell faster now. The bluntness cut deeper than she expected. For a heartbeat, she looked away, lips pressed tight, then back at him. "You think I don't trust you?" "I think you don't trust that I won't walk away," Owen said, calm as ever. He leaned forward slightly, voice lowering. "You wait for it every time I leave the room." Her silence was answer enough. He rose, the scrape of his chair against concrete breaking the stillness. He crossed the hall and stood before her, the lamp casting half his face in shadow. His voice came quiet but firm. "If I wanted to abandon you, I'd have done it in the factory. Or under the tram roof. You'd be dead 3 times over. You're here because I chose to keep you here. And I don't take back choices." Her silver eyes glistened faintly, but she held his gaze. Slowly, she stepped closer until her breath touched his chest. Her voice dropped, a whisper edged with vulnerability. "And if I don't want you to stop watching me?" Something shifted. In his expression, no softening, only a harder certainty. He didn't reach for her at once, didn't take what wasn't offered. He just stood, letting the silence stretch, testing if she would pull back. She didn't. When he finally spoke, his words were blunt, deliberate. "Then you'll tell me where I'm allowed to put my hands." Her breath caught. She nodded once, sharp but trembling. Then she lifted his hand and pressed it flat against her chest, just above the line of her ribs. His palm stayed steady, the heat of it seeping through fabric. "I don't want to be discarded again," she whispered. "You won't be," he answered. No hesitation. The space between them closed. Her lips brushed his first, tentative, then firmer when he didn't pull away. His other hand rose, pausing at her jaw until she leaned into it. Only then did he cup her face, the kiss deepening, slow, and certain dot when they broke apart, foreheads resting together, neither spoke. Words weren't needed. The silence that filled the hall was no longer empty. It carried weight, dangerous and fragile, and both of them knew they had crossed a line that could never be walked back, not outside. Wind scraped the ruins of Tarali's 7. Inside, heat spread from a kiss that belonged to no bargain, no desperation, only choice. The heater hummed low through the night, filling the storage hall with a steady rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. Owen lay on the outer side of the bed frame, boots still on, rifle propped within reach. Beside him, Aira rested on her side, her back turned to the wall, her breathing uneven. For the first time since he had found her in the factory, her shoulders were not coiled with tension. She had kissed him, and he had not turned away. That knowledge lingered in the space between them, heavier than the blanket that covered their bodies. When dawn crept gray through the sealed cracks in the walls, Owen rose first, stretching the stiffness from his scarred frame. He checked the heater, led the still, moved through his rituals with military discipline. Aira stirred when she heard the click of the water pan. She pushed herself upright slowly, his shirt slipping off one pale shoulder. She didn't pull it back at once. Instead, she studied him, the scar across his jaw, the way his movements were always measured, as though every act was a calculation. "You don't sleep much," she said softly. "Enough." He didn't look at her. "Habit. I wake, it changes." In sound, she pulled the blanket tighter around her lap. "And what did you hear last night?" He turned then, meeting her silver eyes. His answer came plain, stripped of embellishment. "Breathing that wasn't mine." Her throat tightened at the words, but she didn't look away. She reached across the blanket, brushed his hand with her fingers, then pulled back quickly, as though uncertain. "You keep saying I'm not a threat, but you look at me like I'm something you can't decide how to handle." Owen sat at the crate table, resting his elbows on his knees. He took his time before answering. "I know how to handle enemies. Famine, collapse. I don't know how to handle someone asking me to stay when I already decided to live without that." Aira's jaw set. "Then stop deciding for me. Let me stay until I choose otherwise." The directness disarmed him. He gave one short nod. "Fair." They ate in silence thin broth with scraps of root, measured carefully. Yet the silence felt different now, less like absence and more like a fragile calm. Afterward, Owen packed a coil of wire and checked the rifle chamber. "We scout west. Bearings, routes in and out. You'll learn the crossings." She cinched the cord around her ankles, wearing his spare trousers rolled at the cuffs. She stood beside him, voice steady. "Beside you?" The city was gray and brittle, wind whispering through broken frames. They moved together, Owen in front, signaling with hand gestures, Aira mirroring each one. When rubble forced them to climb, he hauled her with one clean grip and released as soon as she steadied. When she slipped, he steadied her hip and pulled, his hand back immediately. Every contact carried permission. Every silence built trust. That night, back in the hall, Aira folded the trousers neatly at the bed's edge and slipped into the shirt again. She sat across from him at the crate table, silver eyes locked on his scarred face. "When I told you in the factory that I'd give you a family, I was desperate, testing you. But I wasn't lying. And now," her voice faltered before she forced it steady, "now I'm afraid if I start believing I belong here, you'll decide it's easier to be alone again." Owen didn't answer at once. He set down the bearing he'd been turning in his hand, leaned back, and let the silence weigh itself. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and firm. "I don't waste food, or water, or bullets, and I don't waste people. If I let you in, I don't throw you out." Her eyes glistened. She wanted to believe, but doubt clung like ash. "You say that now. What if I fail you? What if I can't give you what you need?" He crossed the space in 2 steps, kneeling in front of her. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing the faint bruise near her temple. "You've already given me what I needed. Silence that isn't empty. Breath that isn't mine. That's enough." The tears slipped free this time. She leaned into his palm, as if the steadiness of his hand could anchor her. Her voice broke on a whisper. "No one ever said that to me." "Then you've been with the wrong people." She pulled him into a kiss, not tentative but fierce, demanding he understand the risk she took by letting herself feel. He met it, without hesitation, his other hand sliding to her waist, grounding her. When they broke apart, she pressed her forehead to his chest, voice trembling. "Then don't let me go. Not when I falter. Not ever." "You're not leaving this hall unless I walk beside you," Owen said. His tone wasn't soft. It was absolute. Era closed her eyes, arms circling his neck. The vow hung in the dim. Hall, heavier than any oath either had ever spoken. For the first time since the city had fallen, the word family no longer sounded like desperation. It sounded like a plan that could hold. The wind howled through the gaps of the broken city, carrying dust across rooftops and rattling loose metal. Inside the storage hall, the heater hummed steady. The water still clicked its measured rhythm, and for a brief time, Owen allowed himself to believe in the fragile rhythm they had built. 2 bowls, 1 blanket, silence that wasn't empty. Safety never lasted long on Taral, is -7. It began with the sound of faint scrape at the steel door, soft enough that most would mistake it for wind. Owen stiffened instantly, hand sliding to his rifle. He raised his palm, 3 quick taps against the crate. Freeze. Era stopped moving. Silver eyes locked on him, every muscle taut. The scrape came again, followed by the faintest whisper of breath on the other side of the door. Someone was testing the bars. Owen moved silently, checking the sight line through a crack in the wall. A figure shifted in the dusk outside, hood drawn, shoulders broad, the glint of glass catching what little light remained. Another silhouette lingered further back. Not raiders. Raiders didn't wait this long. This was reconnaissance. Era's hand gripped the edge of the crate. Her face was pale, but her voice came low, steady. "They're not here for you. They're here for me." Owen's jaw tightened. "Explain." She swallowed, her throat working. For the first time since he'd met her, her eyes flickered with something close to shame. "When my people cast me out, it wasn't only for unworthiness. I was an archivist assistant. I logged repair maps, storage records. I took copies before I left, hidden vaults, supply grids, power nodes buried under half this city." Her silver eyes met his, unflinching despite the tremor in her hands. "I thought it would save me. It only made me hunted." The revelation dropped between them like a weight. Owen understood instantly. On a dead colony, information was worth more than rations. Worth killing for. Outside, a voice called rough, familiar. "Ver, open the door." Owen froze, the name cutting sharper than the threat. He knew that voice. Years peeled back in an instant, to mud trenches and burned out. Cities, to comrades who had once stood shoulder to shoulder with him. He forced himself to look through the crack again. The man outside pushed back his hood. A scar split his scalp, eyes hard as stone. Recognition hit. Yarrick Halden. Once his unit's demolitions man. Presumed dead after the withdrawal. Owen's stomach turned cold. "You're supposed to be dead," Owen muttered under his breath. Era's voice trembled now, urgency breaking her composure. "If they take me, they won't keep me alive long. Enough to use the maps. They'll bleed me for what I know, then discard me." Owen turned from the door. His scarred face stayed hard, but inside, the vow he had made the night before pressed like steel against his ribs. "I don't waste people. If I let you in, I don't throw you out." He chambered around, safety off, eyes meeting hers. "Then, we don't let them through." She stared at him, breath quickening, as though she hadn't truly believed he would say it. Then her chin lifted, silver eyes blazing with the same pride she'd shown even half-starved in the factory. She stepped beside him, close enough that her shoulder brushed his arm. "Beside you," she said. "Beside me," he confirmed. The steel door shuddered under a testing blow. Yarrick's voice came again, sharper now. "Last chance, Ver. Step aside." Owen set his stance, rifle aimed steady. Era's presence at his side, tightening his resolve. The man he had once fought beside was now the enemy. The family he had thought buried in rubble had shifted into something new, breathing beside him in the ruins. When the next strike rattled the door, Owen's finger rested firm against the trigger. For the first time in years, he wasn't fighting for silence or for survival alone. He was fighting for the choice he had made, for the fragile thing built of trust, rules, and whispered promises in a dead factory god. And if Yarrick forced that door, he would find not a man alone, but two people, who had decided to stand as family against the broken world.